All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, the news for both of the San Diego Padres and shortstop Fernando Tatis Jr. continues to get worse. Tatis has not played a game this year for the Padres as he's been recovering from a fractured wrist that he sustained in the offseason while operating a motorcycle. But then the Padres just had the rug pulled from underneath them when Major League Baseball announced yesterday that Tatis Jr. would be suspended for 80 games after he tested positive for a banned substance. And not only will Tatis miss the rest of the regular season for San Diego, he is also ineligible for the postseason should the Padres make it, as well as being ineligible for next year's World Baseball Classic. Now, the timing of this, I mean, it's never good, but the timing of this was horrific if you're the Padres because this team just acquired all-star outfielder Juan Soto from the Washington Nationals. And the hope for the Padres was that, you know what? The middle of your lineup was going to be solidified with Soto, Tatis, and of course, Manny Machado. Now, the question is, had the Padres known that Tatis had failed his test, because this failed test came back in March, would they have made the trade for Soto? Because they gave up a lot, some of their top prospects to acquire Juan Soto in the hopes to make a legitimate push at the World Series championship this year with the three of these youngsters in the middle of their lineup. Now, from Tatis's standpoint, you know what? The Padres put a lot on you, meaning like they were expecting you to be the face of their franchise, and they gave this kid the bag. I mean, you're talking about San Diego giving Tatis that huge extension when they didn't have to. They gave him a 14-year extension for $340 million. And let's be realistic about it. In doing so, things have not worked out for them. Yes, Tatis had a tremendous 2021 season where he finished third in the MVP voting. And, if he was healthy this year, this kid has the talent to be an MVP caliber player each and every single year. But you can't help your team if you're not out there playing. And you can't help your team when you're doing selfish things off of the field. And I say that about riding the motorcycles. You got to leave that alone. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then with in regards to the banned substance, it's one of those where if you're not sure, at the end of the day, call, ask somebody, find out. But of course, you alone are responsible for what goes into your body. And if you find out that this is a banned substance, obviously you don't take it. Now, with that said, AJ Preller, the Padres general manager, has recently come out and talked about a lack of maturity from Tatis recently. And I totally agree with that. I mean, you're talking about a kid who's 22 years old, and you have to think about what the average person would be doing when they're 22. But at the same time, it's a little bit different when you're a professional athlete. There's a lot of responsibility that's put on you, and you have to be held accountable for your actions, both good and bad. And it's a situation, you have some players who want all of the accolades on them when things go well, and then they try to avoid situations or people make excuses for them when things go bad. No, Fernando Tatis Jr. is solely responsible for the situations that he has put himself into. And of course, the situations that he has put himself into have affected a lot of other people because the Padres have invested so much in him. Major League Baseball has invested so much in him because you see him on a lot of commercials. He's a young, charismatic player, and at the end of the day, he has the it factor. So, it's one of those, he obviously has to work on rehabbing his, rep after this. I think he is young enough that he can recover from this and come back strong. And, he can go back there. And I guarantee you, if he goes out there and comes back on the field and does what he is capable of doing, 5 years from now, nobody's going to even talk about this. But right now, I will say this: so far, he's wasting a golden opportunity that he has. And on top of that, he's making it bad for the young players that are going to come behind him. And I say that from the standpoint that it's, hey, what's going on, Ashin? Please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right. Yeah, the Padres, they better win, is right, because you look at it, and I really felt that once the Padres got Soto, and once there was, the hope that you're going to have Soto, Machado, and Tatis coming back in that lineup, I would say, you know what, fine. San Diego's not going to win the NL West, obviously, because the Dodgers are on a roll right now. And the thing is, at the end of the day, like, obviously the playoffs are a different beast, and and the hope was, of course, you get Tatis back in the rhythm heading into the postseason, and of course, Soto has shown that he can be a quality postseason player. And then you have a veteran like Machado, that it was going to work out. So now, other guys obviously, have to pick up the bag right now. But to answer your question, who do I think right now are the top two teams in the National League? As of right now, I'm going to go with the Dodgers and I'm going to go with the Mets. However, things can change when you think about the postseason, because for me, one of the biggest questions with the Dodgers is that, you know what, I don't trust their bullpen. That's the biggest thing. And of course, Kershaw is hurt right now. He's going to be back for the postseason. Kershaw is Kershaw. In regards to the Mets, they're a hot team right now, and you have the Buck Showalter factor going for them. But there are a lot of different scenarios, heading into the postseason, where you can't overlook teams. You cannot overlook the Atlanta Braves. They're the defending champs. They still have plenty of talent on that team. They may not win the National League East this year, but nonetheless, I think the Braves still could be a very formidable team. I still think the Padres are, could be a force to be reckoned with in October, even without the services of Fernando Tatis. You still have Juan Soto out there. Um, you still have Manny Machado. You still have talent in this lineup. So, it's a lot of different ways you can go. If I had to choose, who do I think would win the World Series this year? That's a very good question and a very tough question. And I'll say this, there's a lot of good teams out there that have a legitimate shot. You look at the Yankees coming out of the American League. You also look at the Houston Astros coming out of the AL. The Seattle Mariners have given the Yankees some fits this year. Also on the NL side, just like I talked about it, you look at the Mets, you look at the Braves, another team, the St. Louis Cardinals, and I say that because you simply can't write them off, because the Cardinals are one of those teams. It doesn't matter the era that we're talking about. The Cardinals just go out there and find a way to get it done in October. Then you have the Dodgers. Then you have the Padres. And I think what else is going to happen is, what it comes down to is, like, especially with the additional wild card spot right now, it's only going to take somebody to get hot coming down the stretch, maybe like the last week of the regular season or so, and carry that momentum over into October. And of course, anything can happen. Um, you're saying the only team that you're scared of is the Astros. The Dodgers don't scare me. Well, there is some truth to that, and I'll tell you why. Because, as good as the Dodgers have been for about the past decade, they consistently, have struggled at times in the month of October. And I say that because, again, just like I said, you know, the playoffs are a crapshoot, and anything can happen. You get a hot team coming in there, and then the rest is history. I mean, you look at the Braves last year, and I'm not to discredit anything from the Braves, because they were dealing with injuries all year, but it came together at the right time for them. To your point about the Astros, and I've talked about this before, the Astros are a battle tested team, and they've consistently lost players in free agency. And you know what? At the end of the day, they're still going out there and getting it done. And to me, one of the biggest things for the Astros, I look at Dusty Baker. Dusty Baker's been a solid manager throughout his career. He's had his hiccups, throughout his career in October, but nonetheless, if you need a manager that's going to get you to October, Dusty Baker can definitely do it. Dodgers pitching isn't good enough to win the World Series. As we know, pitching mostly wins chips. 100%. I think the Mets are World Series champions this year. Possibility. We got to see. I mean, listen, you got Scherzer and DeGrom at the front of your rotation, and that's a big thing. But, like, listen, you're spot on with the fact that, hey, pitching wins championships. And the more arms that you have, obviously, the better. And speaking of those arms, one thing that I definitely want to keep an eye on is, some of these teams where they don't have starting pitching that can go deep into games, and it's going to affect the bullpens. And I think in some cases, with some teams already, it is affecting their bullpen play because the bullpens, are taxed at this point. So let's see what happens. Who's my favorite team? Honestly, I grew up as a Met fan. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not gonna, I'm not one of those guys that wants to, be biased and say, well, my team is going to win this, that, and the third. No, I'm a realistic fan because, or I pride myself in being a realistic fan. It's one of those where, hey, you know what? You have your ups and downs, you have your ebbs and flows. But, from what I've seen from the Mets so far this season, you definitely have to be optimistic. You're saying you're going to see what you've seen today from the Mets, from the postseason in the Mets. The Grom and Diaz in the game is kind of unfair. And I'll tell you like this, listen, Edwin Diaz is locked in right now, and it's his walk year. And typically, when guys are in their walk year, they have some of their best play, regardless of the sport and regardless of the team. Just look at Aaron Judge with the Yankees right now, and I said that coming into the season, as soon as he couldn't get that long term deal there. But nonetheless, I think Jacob Degrom as well, because Degrom, he's hearing a lot of the rumblings as far as being unable to stay healthy. On top of that, DeGrom is looking for an extension as himself. So with that said, you know what? You got to go out there and perform. And on top of all of that, listen, you bring in a veteran pitcher like Max Scherzer, a future Hall of Famer, and DeGrom has been the big dog in this rotation for the last couple of years. Now you got somebody else to push you. So it's one of those where I think, they're going to get, the best out of DeGrom. They're going to get the best out of Scherzer. And, to your point, I think DeGrom stays. And the reason is you figure the money that Jacob DeGrom wants, there's not a lot of teams in baseball that would pay him that type of money. You figure the Mets at this point, obviously with a new owner and Steve Cohen, the Dodgers, the Yankees. I don't know. Maybe the Red Sox. Yeah, but it's not a lot of teams that are going to go out there and pay him the money that the Mets can. And typically, when you go from one team to another, especially with the team that's groomed you and developed you and done, all the bells and whistles and whatnot for your career, it's a situation where sometimes you're not going to get treated the same way. So it's hit or miss. But I would be surprised if Degrom was in a couple of years wearing another uniform other than the blue and orange of the Mets. You ever thought about being an MLE analyst? Well, listen, I appreciate that, and very quick brief story about it. It's one of those for me where uh you sit back and like read what other people have written, and you sit back and see what other people are saying, and then it's like, no disrespect to those people, but I feel like I could hang with those guys, and that's why I started writing a few years ago for 300 pounds of sportsknowledge.com. Don't write as much as I used to, obviously, but I focus more on this platform right here, and that's it for me. Like, I'll tell you, like I've told other people, it's all about being unbiased. It's all about, just talking about it, as opposed to like not trying to make it about me, just making it about the sport, and just, cutting out all of that excess stuff, all of that rah-rah stuff. And let's just talk about, what we see out there. So I definitely Appreciate that. And another reason why, I'm not an analyst on TV is, hey, you know what? I'm not a suit and tie guy. You see me right here in t-shirts, you see me in hats, and you see me, with my collection of jerseys in the background. But yeah, no, definitely appreciated that, and listen, I definitely appreciate you with the comments that you've given tonight. As you know what, we started off talking about Fernando Tatis and the San Diego Padres, and you know what, we've kept it in the realm of baseball, and covered a lot of things because talking about some of the good teams that are out there right now, as well as some of the teams that have some potential to do some damage in the postseason as well. But jumping back very quickly to the subject of Mr. Tatis and the San Diego Padres, he's still young and he's got plenty of time to figure this out and put it behind him. But the onus is going to be on him. And maybe, just maybe, if the Padres get on a run in the postseason, and even without Tatis, they still have the potential to do so. I think that could humble him a lot because if you see your guys out there doing something, and to me, it's one of those where, hey, you know what? You want to be out there at that party and you can't do it. But to your question right there, or to your comment, you think Tatis was lying about him thinking it was a treatment. Honestly, for me, I'm not going to feel sorry for him. Yes, he's a youngster. I get it. But also, he's a professional. And then if you're unsure about what you're putting in your body, you ask somebody before you do it. Secondly, on top of that, one's an accident, two's a trend. The Padres just gave this kid more than $300 million, and he fractured his wrist not by training and getting ready for baseball. He fractured his wrist on a motorcycle. And you have to realize at that point, your body is your temple, it's your tool. And you can't help your team if you can't play. And I'm not saying that obviously you could still have a car accident. Things happen. You could trip and fall. Things happen. But you still don't have to put yourself out there in a scenario which could hinder you and also hinder people that are around you. Now, the Padres, obviously, it's a situation now that he's suspended. He won't get paid. But, the biggest thing for me, and I said it when he got the money, and I even talked about this when they made the trade for Juan Soto recently, the real money doesn't kick in for a while if you're San Diego. And I think what's going to happen with Fernando Tatis long term is the same thing that happened with the Miami Marlins when they gave Giancarlo Stanton that big deal. A lot of these teams, these smaller market teams, quote unquote, are backloading these deals. So this way, by the time that the real money kicks in, they could trade these guys to a bigger market team that's going to pick up the contract, a la what the Marlins did with the New York Yankees. And of course, I said it then and I'll say it now. Derek Jeter suckered the Yankees into that because John Carlos Stanton, as good as he is, with the exception of his MVP year, he has really been unable to stay healthy. So it's a situation. I think with Tatis, the real money doesn't kick in, and I think this Padres team is going to look, drastically, different in a couple of years. And I say that because Machado is going to be the guy with the big money. I think what happens with Soto is that, hey, before he hits free agency, the Padres know they're not going to keep him. They'll probably trade him, but in the short term, they're going to see what they have. And like I said, with Tatis, before the real money kicks in, he'll be gone as well. Ashin, thank you for the comments. It was a pleasure, to have you, dropping comments on here. And listen, I hope to have you back. Definitely like this and definitely subscribe to this, and I appreciate the comments from you. But yeah, nonetheless, Tatis has definitely put the Padres into a bind, and I think if the Padres are able to make a legitimate run, he'll come back very humbled and very determined next year. But Peter Seidler, the Padres' principal owner, he can't be happy about this because he put a lot of money and time into this youngster, and so far he's been disappointed. AJ Preller has talked about the lack of maturity on the part of young Mr. Tatis. And of course, Bob Melvin, the Padres skippers, has talked about the mistake that the youngster made. But you know what? They definitely still believe in him. So hopefully, for his sake, he has been humbled by this. Hopefully, he'll come back a better player and a better person. And of course, if Tatis comes back as a better player and a better person, the Padres can only reap the benefits of it. So, of course, this definitely puts the kibosh on what San Diego is looking to do in regards to their new trio. They'll have to wait until next year to unveil this big three. But nonetheless, going forward this year, it's going to be on Soto, Machado, and the rest of the guys out there wearing the brown and the 619 to see what they can do as far as getting the Padres their first World Series championship in franchise history. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.